Hey everyone, welcome back to the Quiz Master tutorial series. In this video, we will set up the development environment for our project and also learn how to use GitHub for version control. And whether you are on Windows, Linux, on Mac OS, I got you covered. And by the end of this video, you will have Python, Flask, and SQLite installed on your system and your project hosted on GitHub. So let's dive in. Here we are. So I have made a list for the steps related to the setup and installation. And the first is install Python. The second is then the we will set up a virtual environment, and then we will install the Flask and SQLite, and then we will verify the setup by implementing a sample application, and then we will move to the GitHub setup and basic Git commands. So, might be you are on Mac OS, Linux, or Windows. So Mac OS and Linux process are similar because both are inherited from the Unix. So mostly the commands are same. For Windows, the process is different. So first we will focus on the Linux and Mac OS setup, and then we will move to the Windows. So we have to install the Python first. So if you are on the Linux, so the Linux by default shipped with the Python installed, and if it is not there, then you can install it by just running this command on Ubuntu. For other distro, there might be a different command. So for Ubuntu, you can use this command sudo apt install python 3 and it will install the python 3 on your system. So just verify the Python, it is working or not. It was already being configured in the operating system. So I haven't installed, but you can install with that command if you are not there in your system. So I have the 3.12.3 version on my system and it works fine, I guess. Okay, it's working. So the next step is set up a virtual environment. So what is a virtual environment? So what happens like you have a application 1 and then you have application 2 and then you have application 3 in your system, right? And all the application are uses different versions of the libraries. So might be Flask, could be here some other version, and here it could be something different version, and here also the different. And the Python itself could be different on all three. So, but how we can manage that? Like if we have to install the Python on machine, so you can install only one single version. So how you will manage with the different version on the different application? So this problem uh, can be solved using the virtual environments. So virtual environment basically it's a layer over the operating system that can manage the different dependencies for different projects. So it is just the project basis virtual environment setup. So like for application one, I made a virtual environment and that will only manage the dependency for the application one. The dependency might be the packages of the Python or Python itself. And then we can create a virtual environment for application 2 that will manage the dependencies for the application 2 only. So in this way, we will have different virtual environments for all the application, and this ensures that no dependencies from a application will impact other application, right? Like if the version, if some library version is, is different here, and here is something different, so both will not impact each other. Okay, so that is the work of virtual environment to manage the separate dependencies for separate application. So how we will achieve that? To achieve that, with a Python, we can create using this command on Mac OS or Linux. So first you have to create a project, and then you can create a virtual environment inside that project. So let's start the project, Quiz master, and then run the command python 3 -m when v and .when v. So it is saying the virtual environment was not created successfully because ensure pip is not available. On Debian, you need to install the Python 3 when package using the following command. Okay, so installed the Python 3 -when package. So you can check which version or which module is available on your operating system. For me, it is showing this command to run to install when we module. So I have been installing. Okay, then we will run the command again, and this time it works, I guess. So how we can verify that? So to activate the command, we have to run dot when bin activate, and the virtual environment has been activated, and you can, after work done, you can deactivate also using this command deactivate. Okay, so the virtual environment has been deactivated now, and you can go to other project and start their virtual environment. Okay, so we have to work on this environment, so let's start, or let's activate the virtual environment again. Okay, now we have a separate environment inside this project, and whatever dependencies now we will install, it will be for this project only. It will not impact the other projects. Okay, so we have created a project directory, and we have activated the virtual environment, and then we will see how it works exactly. Inside your app directory, there is a .wenv directory that is being created when you activated the virtual environment. So inside this directory, we have a bin folder where we have all the libraries that are required to run the Python application, like the pip. Like with this, you install or uninstall the module, and the Python itself is there with the version specified, like which version you have activated with. Okay, so if you have activated this virtual environment using the Python 3.12, and in your system having Python 3.13, so you don't need to care about it. It will not impact to other projects also once you start the virtual environment, so it will not impact the other one. So we are done with the virtual environment setup on Mac OS or Linux, and the next step is install Flask and SQLite. So let's start with the Flask installation. So for installing the Flask, we have to just run this command pip install Flask. It is the module, so it will install that module inside this virtual environment only. Okay, it has been installed. Great. Next is SQLite. So SQLite comes like by default when you install the Python, so you don't need to do any setup for the SQLite, it is already being installed. So the next step is verify the setup. So we have installed the Flask and we will verify the setup using by creating a sample Flask application. So just go to the main documentation and create a minimal application. So just copy this code, create a file first and paste it here and save it. And then run the command, then run this command to start a server. Okay, sorry, the file name. Okay, so what we have done, so from the Flask, we have imported the Flask module, and with that, we have created an application here, and then we have created an index route, and in on that route, we are uh, responding with this HTML. Okay, and when we run this command, the flask dash dash app and app, that is the file name, and run, so it starts a development server and that is running on localhost 5000. So if you go to this URL on your browser, you can see the response as hello world that has been responded with the hello function, that is, you know, uh, for the root index. And you can also see the request coming from the browser. So you get the request on the index, and that has been responded with the two-handed status. It means the status is okay. And also uh, the request came for the favicon.ico that is not present in our application, and that has been responded with 404, that is not found. Okay, but the HTML is working fine. Okay, so our sample app is working and the setup verification has been successfully done. The next step is to set up the GitHub and to learn some of the basic Git commands that we are going to use for this project. Not entire, only some that are basic. Okay, so I have listed here. So these are the basic Git commands that we will use: the git init, git remote, git add, git commit, git push. Okay, and we have to understand first some of the terminologies of Git. Okay, so we need to understand the Git first. So Git is a distributed version control for your code base. Uh, so you can manage your versions of whatever changes you have done on your code base on your project. Like you can see in this branch, there are different versions of your code base. So here are something different. Here might be something different due to some changes, merged here, and then the final code base will be something different. So these all are versions of your code base. Okay, so you can go to any versions anytime, and like you can, if you have done something wrong and you want to revert, so you can go back to that version. So this kind of facility you can have with the Git. So that is, that's really powerful tool like for any project. And GitHub basically, it just the a platform that uses the Git technology to host your code base. Okay, so with the Git, the first term is repository, and the repository is basically a central storage for your whole code base that will include all the folders, all the files, and the change history over time that you have done with the files and the project and the folders. The history is like a stack of containers, each holding file changes. For example, adding two files creates one container. Subsequent changes go into new containers, each timestamped, and these containers stack up to form the history. And then we have the .gitignore file. So it tells the repository which file to include or which file to ignore. Like I have created a .gitignore file here, and I don't want to include these two, okay, these two folders. So it will not index these two files when I will initiate this project as repository, and that way I will not push these changes like ever. So then the next command is git init. So with the git init, so just running this. So git init basically it uh, convert your project as git controlled project. Okay. So I just ran this command git init, and it has included these two files only and ignored these two as I have mentioned here. See, the next is git remote. So basically, what we do, as we have created the application here, so our project is completely on local right now. Okay, and we have to push to a host like the GitHub we are going to use. Okay, so we created a repository here by initiating it, right? And then we have to create a repository at your host like the GitHub. So once we have two repositories like in the local and in the remote or at the host, so using the git remote command, we create a connection between these two, like the local and the remote. So with that connection, uh, we have to interact with this with the remote. So I can then push the code from here to the remote, whatever whatever changes I have been doing, and I just want to upload those changes. So I can then able to remotely push. So uh, we will create a repository at the remote now. So how this will work? So to work with GitHub, you have to create an account first. Okay, so you can sign up for GitHub using the email. So after signed in, you see the GitHub dashboard like this. Just create a repository. For creating this, you have to click here on the plus button and the new repository, and then give a name to your project or repository, and whatever you can do like public or private. So like I'm setting as private, and do not add a readme or a license or git ignore, just the name and the selection of public or private, and then you are good to create the repository. So when you create the repository, you can have the blank, like there is no file and all. This project is empty for now, and if you see the process. So it has been written for the new repository, but and or to push an existing repository. So we have the repository existing, so we will add this remote from here to make connection with this remote location. Okay, so by this command we are git remote, we are adding in our repository a remote that is named origin, and the remote location of the origin is this. Okay, and this is the location of our repository that has been created on GitHub. Okay, so once I have initiated or added the remote, now we have connected our local repository to the remote repository. Okay, so we are in sync now. Then we have git add. Git add is, it creates a snapshot of your changes. If I just want to push push these changes, okay, so how we will do that? So I have to create a snapshot of that. Okay, so I have to run git add f.py, and it will index the changes in the upcoming history. Okay, so when we will push, or when we will uh, deploy these changes or upload these changes to remote, only this file will be pushed. Okay, now if I want to add this file also, so I can add using git add and gitignore. So now our both files are indexed for the upcoming history. Okay, there is one more shortcut, that is the git add dot. With this command we index all the changes that we have just done. Okay, then there is a git commit command. So whatever snapshot we have created to push, okay, so like I have created snapshot for two files, okay, or index these two file changes, okay, for the upcoming history. So with the git commit we just uh, add a description to that snapshot, like uh, we are just naming it, like what we are going to do, or how it will show in the history. Okay, like I have been showing initialized initialized uh, quiz master app. So with the git commit I have been giving a message, and after we are done with the naming, the snapshot is now indexed completely, and then the next command is git push. So what git push does, so with the git push we have to decide like where we want to push. So before talking about the git push, we have to understand branches in git. So when we initiated our project or the repository, just create one main branch, okay, or master branch. So as you can see here, it is on the main. So initially when we created, it just created one main branch, okay, where all of the changes occurred at first place. Okay, and and what will happen, we just pointed this main branch to production. So if we have pointed that main branch to production, we cannot directly push to this branch. Okay, we have to have some other branches to work on. Like there is some there is some feature came and you have to work on that particular feature. So you cannot directly work on the main. You have to work on that particular feature. So you can create a branch from main, and in that branch you work for that particular feature. Okay, and once you are done, then you merge that feature branch to your main branch. Okay, so there might be different branches from different developers that will it's kind of multiple rivers, and then met at the main river. So it's something like that. So there are different branches, and then there's a main branch, and where all the branches, all the feature branches code pushes to the main branch. Okay, so that's why there can be multiple branches. So when you push your changes, so you write like this: git push origin and main. What it means? So it means we are pushing the main branch into the origin remote. Okay, so once we run this, so it will push all the changes to remote, and when we reload this, so we have both the files that we have added after the initialization of the project. Got it? So we are done with the GitHub setup and the basic Git commands. And so this whole process was for the Linux and Mac OS. Okay, and for uh, doing the same on Windows, so we have to install the WSL on Windows. With the WSL, we can have the similar Linux experience on Windows. Then the process will be the same that we have done for the Linux here. Okay, that's it for this video. Now you have installed Python, Flask, and SQLite in your project controlled by Git and hosted on GitHub. Okay, in the next video we will dive into Flask basics, and we will set up the initial structure of the project. Okay, so see you in the next one.